Ladies and gentlemen, we are live! If you followed CCW Digital for a while, you know the fall is when we usually run our engagement-themed event. We used to focus on multi-channel, then it became omni-channel, and then it became next-generation engagement. We're very much sticking with that engagement theme for our current CCW Fall Online. We're focusing on what we're going to dub the age of hyper-connections. Truly great experiences, after all, require truly unparalleled connections. These connections, it should be noted, are not about simple overtures such as saying the customer's name a few extra times. It's about a wholehearted commitment to understand customer sentiment and intent and then craft your experiences accordingly. Whether it's self-service making transactions simpler or more convenient, or live agents making complex matters less problematic, it's all about making things meaningfully better for customers, frictionless without being dismissive, personal without being too lengthy. We're not just going to focus on the front end of engagement, however. Over the course of the next 2 days, we'll also be looking at the back end. After all, if it's the age of hyper-connections, it's important to consider how the overall business and contact center are connected. How can we make our contact center smarter, more efficient, and ultimately more capable of great connections? It wouldn't be a great CX event without an emphasis on some cool technology, so we'll of course look at AI, we'll look at different kind of innovations that are happening in the space to really understand how best to elevate customer engagement. For now, however, we really want to understand the paradigm shift associated with hyperconnections in this age of next-generation engagement. And we actually have the best CX leader in the world helping us navigate the topic. Now, to sort of give an overview of what we're talking about here, I think we all can agree that customer centricity, the idea, is not optional. It's an absolute requirement for doing business. If you don't understand that, then you have no chance of success in today's era. Therefore, you can't look at, customer centricity as a differentiator. You can't feel good about yourself just because you, on paper, declare a commitment to the customer. You're not special because everyone says that. Everyone does that. What really makes you special, what makes you different, what makes customers want to become passionate about your brand is actually making that customer centricity a reality. And that's when you start to retool and rethink your different processes and systems and metrics, everything with the customer in mind. Now, even that, I think, is one step behind where the true leaders are going. That doesn't, because you can have these great engagements, but if you leave those engagements kind of on the front end, you're missing a huge opportunity to truly elevate the experience moving forward. And so true customer centricity also involves leveraging the insight you gain from these interactions to drive further business improvement, both inside and outside of the customer experience function. Our speaker walked this journey as she ended up becoming the Customer Experience Leader of the Year at the 2017 CCW Awards. And so that, if you're going to talk about someone who can share insights about this journey, about really thriving in the age of hyperconnections, who better than Wei-Wu Curtis of Choice Hotels, who is our 2017 CX Leader of the Year. We're thrilled to have you here today.
Yeah, thank you for having me. This is exciting.
Great, and it's interesting that we're keeping the streak alive. In 2016, we had Deb Colangelo, who was the CX Leader of the Year last year. She gave some great insights. So the bar is really high for you, but we're very excited to continue, I think, really showcasing people who not only are working for great organizations, but also driving a lot of change as leaders, creating a sense of collaboration, really putting that vision out there, but also making sure it goes into practice. So we're always thrilled to have someone who, is not only kind of a visionary, not only kind of in the trenches, but has really put everything together. So no pressure, but we're expecting a lot of great things from this session.
Okay. Sounds good.
Great. So kind of starting at the top, I want to get to the root of, I think, what everyone talks about now. Every conversation you have is this idea of machines handling transactions, humans handling complex interactions. I mean, at the high level, is that accurate? Is that kind of what you're preparing for? Is that what you see as the new normal when it comes to customer engagement?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when you're thinking about the new normal, I think technology such as artificial intelligence and chatbots is going to have its positioning within the contact centers. Now it's just a matter of when. So when you're looking throughout the digital landscape and how technology continues to be so pervasive in our operations, we as a contact center within the organization has to understand, one, how does technology and all these new mechanics kind of play within our world? And two, how do the contact centers need to really kind of pivot and position themselves within this new digital landscape? I mean, eventually, do I think machines will take over the world and there'll be no need for human beings? No, I think there'll be definitely a balance to where you're absolutely right. Machines will take care of the simpler self-service type of transactions and the more complex, or when technology fails, and that's when people will shift and really kind of be dealing with actual people.
Now, what does preparation entail for that? Because it seems like you agree that that's where we're going, and I think that a lot of people also agree that that's where we're going. And so, but what does it really take to, I think, get your contact center, get your customer experience function ready for that dichotomy, where technology actually can solve some of the basic problems, and agents then are prepared for the more escalated, more nuanced, more complex challenges?
Yeah, I would say, first and foremost, when you're looking at artificial intelligence and chatbots and omni-channel, you have to get out of the notion of just being threatened. That people's jobs are not going away; they're just going to evolve and redefine itself. And so in terms of preparation for us, we've really kind of had to think about it from a strategic perspective on how is technology going to play in complement to our contact centers, and then how do we need to rethink how our contact centers are viewed within our organization, but more importantly within our industry. And so with my leaders, the biggest phrase that I use all the time is turn the invisible visible. And so there's a lot of pieces within the contact centers that we do in terms of collecting KPIs, driving performance, and all those typical things that are absolutely important day to day, but many times we're really kind of in the seat of being reactionary. And so how do we turn that landscape around and be able to leverage the millions of transactions that come within our contact centers and better prepare ourselves for what do the dynamics look like? What are the shifts in terms of channels and where our people are going, our guests and our customers? And then how do we internally really kind of look at our own processes and procedures and outlook to be able to adapt well as these things continue to unfold?
Yeah, I think that's important, because when you start to understand, I think, where customers are going and what they expect, that's naturally going to allow your experience design to fall into place. And even right there, I think we're already seeing your mindset being someone that really does want to frame the experience for the customer. But I'm curious, particularly on the agent side, because a lot of times when we have this conversation, when we talk about preparations, everyone focuses on making sure that technology is up for the challenge, that whether it's using AI or just making self-service better, you need to make sure that your technology can handle customers, I think, is kind of what a lot of people look to. But I wonder if there's actually another challenge here, and that is, are agents ready for kind of this more versatile, more complex scenario? Because, frankly, if right now a lot of agents are handling basic tasks, they're not necessarily trained, they're not necessarily prepared for the kind of unpredictability that may happen when the only calls that they're really dealing with are very complex ones. So I'm wondering, from an agent standpoint, if you see them needing to either hone or acquire new skills and new competencies to be able to, I think, continue to serve customers as the landscape changes.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think you're exactly right. I mean, when you think about how many years contact centers have pretty rigidly have done the work, right? And people are being held to utilization and average handle time, and you're looking at service levels, and there's scripting in many environments. That's years and years of a prescribed way and method of doing business. And so now what we are fundamentally asking our frontline folks is, let's just forget about that. You have to do more, be more, and really kind of evolve your way of thinking and your skill sets, and that's not an easy task. And I would say first and foremost, you have to figure out and define kind of what is your vision, and we have to transform it inside out culturally. So I think it is a monumental task to get agents away from doing a task and really kind of sounding kind of robotic in those environments to treating every interaction one-on-one, more personable, and really listening in on the skill sets to be able to figure out what are people truly calling about, what are they concerned about, and have we really kind of made it seamless and effortless for them in these interactions. So you're absolutely right. Agents will have to adapt. I think that'll take time, but the entire industry has to pivot this kind of this whole mentality.
Now, kind of moving then into your journey, because I think that, whether you've particularly been taking all these points into account or whether you were just trying to, I think, in general, create a more customer-centric environment, what really stood out as far as your application for CX Leader of the Year, and just I know from, seeing you kind of talk to other people in the space, what kind of is a standout achievement for you has been the way you kind of rethought your organization's approach to quality. And I'm wondering if you can sort of walk us through kind of what you did there, what the thinking was, and how that came to be.
Yeah, absolutely. So when we had fundamentally looked at how we are structured today, we were basically doing the same thing and really kind of expecting different results. And so when you looked at all of kind of the support features or mechanisms that kind of cross the board with all of my lines of businesses, we really kind of rethought how we were approaching workforce management, how we were approaching quality, how we were approaching training. And so quality was a really good place to start. And so when we looked at it, before we even went into really looking at that, we had to kind of pose the question of what are we trying to look for and solve for? And first and foremost, it was we decided to pick one line of business, and that was our reservation sales. And so with that line of business, we saw that every peak season, which is generally our summer months, we would always dip in terms of conversion. So our performance would always go down during those months. And I asked the question, why? Why does this happen? And I got several responses from people in the industry who've been here for many years saying, year after year we see this. People are typically shopping around more and less inclined to book, or that our hotels are filled, and so there's not a lot of opportunities to be able to make those conversions or those bookings. So I took the quality assurance team, and typically what their role in our organization was to listen to calls, to work with our partner sites to calibrate, and then to take those findings and summarize it and use that to help better agent performance and also provide feedback to the training team on, what are the things that we need to change in our curriculum and our design. And that really wasn't moving the needle. So we decided, let's change kind of this approach a little bit. And so I asked the quality assurance team, look, go into the reservation sales and listen to calls, but don't listen to calls for the purpose and through the lens of developing agents. Look through the lens of what is causing us to take a dip in conversion. What is driving this impact towards our bottom line? And ultimately what they came back with is that we just weren't asking for the sale. And so we weren't being aggressive enough or really kind of acting like a true sales organization. And so with those findings, quality assurance was able to work with the leadership in that business, and together they revamped the incentive program, they redesigned the training and curriculum, and they changed their approach in terms of how to coach and develop the supervisors and the leaderships of those centers to reinforce kind of this new notion of being a true sales organization. And so that went into effect, and it was 2016 that we really kind of saw the results of our efforts. And so that was really kind of the first year we didn't take a dip in conversion during the peak season. We actually saw a slight increase year over year. And then now going into 2017, now that we've had a little bit more time to fine-tune things, we're seeing over a 200 basis points improvement year over year for conversion.
And obviously, I think when you have those results, obviously it's very easy to say that you made the right decision. But I'd imagine, as you even mentioned, there were some challenges you encountered along the way. And I'd also imagine that when you're talking about a shift in thinking, particularly something that has been so ingrained in operational culture as kind of the way you evaluate performance and quality, I'm wondering, if you faced any organizational resistance. And by that question, I don't only mean, at the high level from the C-level what they were thinking, but also even within the operation, people that were accustomed to managing the contact center or the customer experience function in a certain way.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, when you look at the different metrics that agents are being held responsible to, and a lot of the compensation is tied to it, we come in now and saying, you know what, that quality monitoring form and that score that you get, just throw it out the window. Just throw it out the window, and we're going to move more towards a competency-based model, which is a lot more gray, less black and white. Then there were a lot of separation anxiety. How were you going to truly measure that new approach and continue to develop and manage people? And so it was a huge departure from how most people typically think about quality within contact centers. And so it took a little while because people were skittish in terms of, what does success look like in this new world? How am I going to be held accountable for making sure that my agents are successful in this new structure? So there was a lot of reservation, and I think we really kind of worked with them to kind of take down the barriers to say, this all is kind of a proof of concept for us, and we're going to work through it. And so we gave some concessions along the way that we weren't going to hold certain things accountable, that we were just mainly getting the learnings from it. And I think by reassuring our partners of that approach, guiding them along the way why we're doing certain things, and really having them actively participate along this journey helped with some of that reservation and the resistance.
And what about actual, then not necessarily a mental resistance, but actual just, growing pains associated with it? I think, again, when you identified some of the challenges earlier, you were focusing on sort of where maybe you didn't go far enough, or where, maybe you need to kind of calibrate the direction. But once you kind of got the direction right, or the organization adapted to this, where were there some challenges? I'd imagine that, organizations that are trying to maybe replicate what you did would be curious where they need to look at, potential snags along the way.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when you think about how long people have been in this industry and how long the agents have been doing the work, many of these folks have been in that contact center world for many years, and they are used to doing a job a certain way for so long. And so you're asking a person or people, teams of people, to really redo what has been so ingrained in them. And so I think part of the resistance was even from the employee side, that they weren't entirely convinced of this, that they thought that if they didn't really understand and it wasn't really defined definitively in terms of what success looks like, then they were going to get dinged, or that they would get in trouble, or that would impact their compensation. And so a lot of it was a proof of concept, and a lot of it was a trust factor for the employees to work with the leadership team in terms of what we're trying and striving to do. And so now you're asking people, you know what, you have a personality, let's focus on that, let's make each interaction personable, let's use your listening skills. And many people kind of took a pause. And I'm not going to say that it was perfect right off the bat, and we still continue to work on that. There are parts of the population, people coming in new, that have adapted very well to this new method and approach. But the people who've been around for a while, they're slow to kind of take this new direction. So it continues to be a work in progress.
But it has been successful already, and I think you started to share some of those results. And I'm curious if there's any kind of more perspectives you have on the outcome, maybe areas for improvement or areas that you're happy about. But I also, when thinking about results, want to think, if there's any extent to which you've gone back and thought, how has this affected the old definition of quality? And the reason I ask that question is because at our last event, CX Online, I was speaking to someone, and he brought up how they kind of abandoned traditional efficiency metrics, we started focusing more on the customer-oriented things, nothing too outrageous. But what was interesting, he said, in doing so, they actually became more efficient. If you were to go back and say what their efficiency was, they're actually more operationally efficient by focusing on the customer than they were when they were just focusing on efficiency metrics. And so I'm wondering, if you were to go back and look at the old world way of looking at quality, how, your current experience would kind of fare in that regard.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to compare because they're so different. There's such night and day differences. I mean, when you think about the old way of quality, right, we drafted and approached what we believe was the problem and what we believe was the solution. And so through the scripting and through call flows and through saying the name 3 times and a common greeting and having certain touch points within it, we thought that all of those scripted, defined elements equated to engagement. And that was so far from the truth. And so when you look at our model today, again, it is a lot more freeform. that agents are empowered and have the flexibility to really go and take the conversation based off of how that particular interaction goes. And so if you were to take our new environment back to the old ways, we would not score very well at all from a scoring perspective. But if you're looking at, well, is our new method and our new approach driving the necessary business results that we want it to, then absolutely, we're way more successful today. So I think it's kind of a balancing act between, understanding what you want to get out of your quality process from an employee development and performance perspective, and then from a more business operational end result perspective.
Yeah, I think that's valuable. So essentially, what you were trying to achieve, you've always been trying to achieve, you're just better at achieving now due to the new model. And so, is that a fair assessment that essentially it's not that your outcome, you always had, I think, the same kind of big, high level outcome in mind, but I think the different ways you were signaling that were, I guess, not what you really wanted, and by correcting the way you score, correcting the way you kind of look at those goals on the intermediate basis, you're more likely to achieve those goals at the end by kind of adopting your new model.
Yeah, absolutely. When we realize, or we're kind of really wondering, it's like, look, we're fine tuning things, and we thought we were doing things differently, and yet performance and results just weren't there, and it was very incremental and minor. And what we realized with an inside-out approach is that the way that we approached quality was the hindrance. That we were our own worst enemies in the fact that here we're saying that we wanted more fluid transaction, we wanted more personable, we wanted better listening skills, but we did it to ourselves in terms of that overall structure of quality. Because there were specific tasks, it was very checkboxy, and they stuck to the old ways. Why? Well, because that was something that they were used to. It was very visible with scoring, and it tied back to the compensation.
Makes perfect sense. Now, as impressive as this area is, it, interestingly enough, was not the only, I think, achievement really highlighted in your kind of, list application for CX Leader of the Year. Not the only thing that I think is impressive that you've done. Another focus, and one that I think also really is very resonant with where we are right now as far as the role of the contact center, is the impact that interactions can have on, loyalty. Really starting to look at, when you start to interact with customers, what can you do to not only satisfy them right now and not only make them perhaps not leave your business, but actually feel passionate about working with you moving forward. And so when we spoke recently, you talked about how, it's very common in sort of the hospitality industry to have loyalty programs that are like, stay 10 nights, get one free. And that's fine. That works occasionally. But you kind of feel like loyalty needs to be on a more every interaction kind of basis. I'm wondering if you can walk us through maybe why you feel that way and what are some of the things you do to cultivate loyalty with each individual experience.
Yeah, absolutely. When we look across the board in the hospitality industry, we kind of coined the term the sea of sameness. There's not a lot that kind of differentiates us from other hoteliers, but we really spent a lot of time and effort in terms of rebranding and redesigning our entire loyalty program. And that's from the program itself, and that's also from the support mechanisms from an operational perspective. So when you're looking at our new program, there's some fundamental concepts that we want to drive home. One is stickiness. Once they get into our loyalty program, how do we get them to stick with our program? And with that, they have to see immediate benefits. Just like your point, you don't have to be a certain level of elite membership to be able to get something in the end. And so what's in it for them? Well, we redesigned our loyalty program, and once people sign up, they can go into their profile, and we call it your extras. You can go there and pick what you want. So the very first stay, you'll be rewarded. And every stay thereafter, you'll be immediately rewarded, whether it is a certain percent off of a guest or a $5 gift card to Starbucks or a discount with Uber. Every time that you stay at a Choice Hotel, every member will get something. And as you move up the ring in terms of the status of memberships, then you get more along the way as well. You can get points, or you can get snacks or other benefits on property. But we want to recognize everybody as being important, and we want to make sure that that also continues to bleed over into our operations to make sure that people are recognized and that people feel valued regardless of where they are in terms of that loyalty spectrum.
And then once you start to understand that, I think another opportunity opens up, and that is the role of, I think, leveraging customer data, not just about an individual customer, but also to improve the overall experience. And so, what role do agents specifically play in that process? Is it a situation where they now, in addition to making better connections with customers, need to be trained to also think about what data they can collect for the long term, or is that more of a systemic technology kind of focus?
No, I mean, I think it goes hand in hand. It has to be both, right? So if you look at the, technology and kind of what it can get, there is so much big data out there that it's mind-numbing. And so part of the struggle with big data is how do we make it meaningful? And so I'll take our website, for example. We know exactly where people have been, what time they were on our website, and where they dropped off. But one thing that technology doesn't tell us is the why. And I think that's where the human factor and the frontline agents can help fill in and color in that part of the interaction. So when they come into our contact centers, again, one of the items that we're building into our culture is think about the customers first. So if they're coming into our channels and their voice channels, why? So were they in another channel, or did they have difficulties prior to calling to us? And so we're really trying to train our frontline associates, one, to take care of that interaction, but to also be inquisitive and figure out what was it that caused them to contact us. Was it a system issue? Was it the fact that they had problems finding certain information? Did they just not trust the technology? Or did they just not believe and need some reassurance? And so once we can gather that data, now we can turn that into valuable insights coupled with the data points that we collected through a technology perspective.
And then making that actionable for the rest of the business, though, because I think, obviously the customer management profession, people within our community, we know the importance of the voice of the customer. We know the importance of kind of interaction analytics, but making it tangible for the rest of the business, people who only care, I think, about those high-level output metrics and not necessarily what's going into each interaction, how do you kind of bring the voice of the customer, bring these insights to life for those people who, while not as close to the customer, are actually the ones controlling budgets and making a lot of decisions?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I think when you look at the kind of the landscape, contact centers have always been large operating expenses, and we do what we do because we feel passionate about the customers, and so we serve as the advocate to being the voice of the customers. And so what we really have done is turn our organization inside out. And what I mean by that is that we have really kind of looked across the landscape of choice internally to say, okay, well, what are the different ways that we can help drive customer experience? And you're exactly right. Anything that we bring up, anything that we propose must drive or must tie directly into a bottom line. And so what we are doing is, again, taking the data, taking the insights of what we're gathering in terms of customer experience, and now we're working closer than ever with the website team, with the mobile development team, with digital e-commerce and marketing. And so we're able to kind of help close that gap, and I'll give you a specific example. So when people are on the internet and they go to our website and they shop around, people drop off at a certain point and they contact our centers. And in one specific instance, we saw this huge spike in terms of people calling our call centers because they tried to log in on their account and they got a certain error message. When we looked at that error message, we asked the customers coming in, what was it about that error message that confusing? And we realized that the confusing verbiage of that error message drove and caused more people to call into our contact centers because they just weren't too sure what that meant. And so what we did was then we collaborated and worked with the website team to say, look, we've seen a spike. This is the X amount of number of calls. This is the sentiment. This is the experience that the customers are feeling. And we were able to push that one particular issue to the top of their list. So then the very next release, we worked out better verbiage. And what we saw there afterwards was a pretty significant dip in call volume for that particular issue. So we knew post-resolution and pre-resolution that it made a difference. And so by being the advocate of the customers and making sure that we understand where their pain points are, then we collectively now take that information and help work with these internal teams so that they can continue to fine-tune their platforms, continue to fine-tune their delivery methods to the customers in order to drive more seamless delivery of service, more loyalty, because we made it easy for them to do work with us.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's almost in some ways kind of the same kind of mindset that I think drove your revamped approach to quality. It's looking at what actually drives that outcome of better customer engagement, better customer satisfaction, better loyalty, and how can we kind of translate in that to kind of a repeatable, kind of measurable kind of product for your agents. When it comes to the overall customer experience, it's the same thing. We obviously want to drive customer satisfaction and then loyalty and then advocacy and then revenue, but we can't just look at the numbers and say, okay, we've either done it or not. It's really important to understand what specific factors affect those outcomes and what can we as a business do to correct those. And when you start to, I think, really put this, under the idea that the customer behavior, customer sentiment is going to tell you that answer better than anyone else in the world, better than any resource, looking at what the customers actually go through and how it makes them feel and how it changes their behavior, that's going to be the real determinant about whether your initiatives to achieve your ultimate goals are successful or not.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think those are, I think you bring up a lot of great key points in terms of that customer interaction, that behavior. And so when you're looking at things aren't as mechanic and aren't as black and white as you think they are. And so, a lot of times when we do try certain solutions and stuff, our other parts of the organization, incredibly talented. They do the A/B testing. They do service and focus groups, and they go out and talk to the customers. But again, what they're asking in terms of that experience and that information, there's a bit of a disconnect because they're asking those people, like I said, at the end or the tail end of that interaction or days, weeks, and months after they've already had the interaction with us. So what better place to really understand and observe in real time what the customers are actually feeling and actually going through.
And obviously you get access to more data points as well. I think, we often talk about how the real story is often not the extremes. It's not the, person who over time is super loyal. It's not the person who over time is necessarily super angry. It's oftentimes the ones where you're not going to see them necessarily show up on an extreme, but they're the individual quirks, the way you can drill down on what's happening on the individual interaction will tell you whether their silence or their complacency is because they love how everything's going or because they right now have no better option, but maybe a better option will come down the road. I think the real difference between looking at customers who accept what's going on versus customers who are passionate about what's going on, that's sort of what distinguishes a business from one that thrives from one that is thriving right now but is always in danger of losing to the competition. And so your approach by being able to look at what's really happening at the time of the interaction will go a long way, I think, in determining how customers really feel about it and how what you can do, these minor tweaks you can make or major tweaks you can make to ensure that customers are not simply working with you out of habit or out of a lack of better options right now, but because they're really getting the best experience possible.
Yeah, absolutely.
Great. Well, I want to thank you so much for your insights today. Obviously that is a great way to, I think, start a program that's going to be based on the idea of elevating customer engagement. I think your combination of ideas about really thinking about the way agents perform in terms of what really matters to the customer, thinking about what you can do within each interaction to make it special, build real loyalty as opposed to just repetition or satisfaction, and then what these interactions tell you for the business, how they can help to identify pain points, how by understanding what happens at the time of the interaction, you can start to craft better customer experience strategies and better business strategies. That's really the heart of what it takes to really engage with customers in this era of hyper connections. And I think it's a great starting point as we explore some of the other sessions that will provide some ideas for capitalizing on that framework. So thank you so much for everything you shared today.
Yeah, absolutely. This is a great honor to really kind of start this session and a great experience as well. So thank you for that opportunity to kind of share our story.
Great, and thanks to everyone who joined us for this first session. Of course, I want to congratulate again our great speaker here on being the CX Leader of the Year. And I want to encourage everyone right now, we have a brief networking break where you can check out those virtual booths in our virtual exhibit hall, download some complimentary content, really start to, I think, get all the resources possible to not just think about customer centricity, but deliver it, because it's the delivery that makes you special, not the thought process. So, well, enjoy the next 25 minutes or so for that networking break, and right at 1, we'll be back with our interactive roundtable.